The alarm hit before I even opened my eyes. 3 short pulses, then a 4th long one. That pattern meant only one thing on this ship. Threat detected. Not a drill, not a system glitch, a real threat, somewhere close, and my body was already moving before my mind caught up. My name is Ethan Cole, and I have spent the last 6 years of my life guarding people who do not think I am worth much more than a wall that can bleed. I grabbed my gear from the rack beside my bunk and ran down the narrow corridor of the transport ship, my boots slamming against the metal floor in a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. Around me, other soldiers were doing the same. Marcus Bell was already ahead of me, pulling his jacket over his shoulder while still running. Liam Carter came out of the mess hall with half a ration bar still in his hand, chewing fast, eyes sharp. We were human. All of us on this deck were human. That was not an accident. It was policy. The hierarchy, the massive alliance of alien worlds that ruled most of known space, had a very specific idea about where humans belonged. Not in their council chambers, not in their command rooms. On the front line, where things got dangerous, where somebody needed to take a hit so someone more important did not have to. We were fast. We healed quickly. We did not panic the way some of their other species did under fire. And most importantly, from their point of view, we were replaceable. I reached the briefing deck just as the doors slid open, and Grace Dawson, our squad leader, was already waiting with a data screen glowing in front of her. "Convoy escort," she said, not looking up. "The Queen Regent is traveling through the Halvan corridor in 4 hours. We are the ground security detail." Marcus groaned beside me. "Meet shield duty," he muttered. Again. Grace shot him a look, but she did not disagree. Everyone on this deck had done this kind of assignment before. Guarding a member of hierarchy royalty meant standing in the open, in full view, while dignitaries and nobles from a dozen alien species stayed safely tucked behind layers of security. If something went wrong, we were the first thing standing between danger and the people who mattered. At least, the people who were considered to matter. I had stopped being angry about it a long time ago. Anger was a waste of energy you needed for staying alive. But it still sat there, quiet, in the back of my mind, every single time. "Why us?" Liam asked, finishing his ration bar in one last bite. "There are a dozen other squads on this ship." "Because we are good," Grace said simply, "and because the Queen Regent's own honor guard requested extra bodies. Word is there have been unconfirmed threats along the corridor." "Unconfirmed," Marcus repeated, meaning nobody important enough believed it was worth checking out properly. Nobody answered him, because we all knew he was probably right. We suited up in silence after that. I checked my rifle twice, my sidearm once, and the plating across my chest a 3rd time, out of habit more than doubt. My hands did not shake. They never did anymore. The first few times I had gone out on a mission like this, years ago, my whole body had trembled before we even left the ship. Now there was only a steady, cold focus, the kind that came from doing something so many times that fear had worn itself down into simple readiness. The transport carrying the Queen Regent's convoy was unlike anything I had grown up around. Sleek, silver, curved like a drop of liquid metal frozen in motion. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost wrong for something meant to travel through hostile territory. The hierarchy liked to project strength through elegance. We liked to survive. Those two things did not always match. I took my position along the outer perimeter of the convoy, standing at the edge of a wide stone platform where the Queen Regent would eventually disembark to greet local dignitaries. Around me, alien guards from 3 different species stood in ceremonial formation, their armor polished, their weapons more decorative than practical. They were here for appearance. We were here for everything else. One of them, a tall being with pale blue skin and narrow golden eyes, glanced at me the way most hierarchy citizens did. Not quite disgust, not quite fear, something in between, like looking at a large predator that happened to be on a leash. "Human," he said, in the clipped, formal tone many of them used with us. "Stay behind the marked line unless instructed otherwise. Understood, I said, because arguing never changed anything, and I had learned that a long time ago. He walked away without another word. I had heard stories, growing up, about how humanity first joined the hierarchy. We were not invited because of our art, our science, or our culture. We were invited because during first contact, when a group of raiders attacked a hierarchy outpost close to our solar system, human volunteers fought back with a kind of ferocity that stunned the aliens watching. We did not have the strongest weapons or the smartest tactics. We simply refused to stop, even when the odds said we should have. That single trait, being willing to keep fighting long after logic said to quit, became the reason humanity was allowed into the hierarchy at all. And it became the reason we were placed exactly where we stood now, on the edge of every dangerous situation, absorbing the first blow so someone else did not have to. The convoy began moving an hour later, gliding low over the corridor's rocky terrain, a long line of transport vehicles surrounded by our formation on the ground. I walked in step with my squad, scanning the horizon out of habit, watching shadows shift between distant rock formations. "You feel that?" Liam asked quietly, falling into step beside me. "Feel what?" "I don't know. Just quiet. Too quiet." He was right. The corridor should have had wind, distant wildlife sounds, something. Instead, there was only the low hum of the convoy's engines and our own footsteps against the dust. Grace's voice came through our comm line, calm but sharpened at the edges. "Command says sensors are picking up movement 2 kilometers out. Could be wildlife." "Could be," Marcus said under his breath. "Or could be something Hierarchy Command decided wasn't worth mentioning until now." I did not answer him, but I tightened my grip on my rifle anyway. Ahead of us, the Queen Regent's personal transport slowed as it approached a wide stone bridge crossing a deep ravine. This was the most exposed section of the entire route, a place where the convoy would be visible from almost every angle for nearly 2 full minutes. My instructors back in training had drilled into us, over and over, that exposed crossings like this were where things went wrong. I felt my pulse pick up slightly as we reached the edge of the bridge. "Command," Grace said into the comm, her voice steady. "Confirm status on that movement reading." There was a pause, too long a pause. "Command, repeat, confirm status." Static answered her first, then a broken voice cut through. "Movement contacts. Multiple. Corridor breach." The transmission cut off completely. Every soldier on that bridge went still for half a second, the kind of stillness that happens right before everything falls apart. I looked up toward the rocky ridges surrounding the ravine, and that was when I saw it. Small glints of light, reflecting off metal, scattered along both sides of the ridge. Dozens of them. "Contact," I shouted, raising my rifle. "Multiple positions, high ground, both sides." The alien guards around me hesitated. Actually hesitated, turning toward the ridges with confused, uncertain movements, their ceremonial weapons clearly not built for a real fight. Grace's voice cracked through the comm one final time before the first shots rang out across the bridge. "Protect the Queen Regent, now." The bridge turned into chaos in less than 3 seconds. Weapon fire streaked down from the ridges on both sides, bright bolts of energy slicing through the air, striking stone, striking metal, striking the alien guards who had no idea how to react to something this fast and this real. 2 of them dropped almost instantly, their ceremonial armor doing nothing against the kind of firepower now raining down on us. I hit the ground behind a low stone barrier, rolling once, coming back up with my rifle, already firing toward the nearest ridge position. Beside me, Marcus was doing the same, shouting something I could not fully hear over the noise. Liam had pulled 2 of the alien guards behind cover, dragging one of them by the collar of his ceremonial uniform because the guard himself seemed frozen in shock. Grace's voice cut through the comm, sharp and clear despite the chaos. "Ethan, the Queen Regent's transport is stopped in the open. She is exposed." I turned my head and saw it immediately. The Queen Regent's personal vehicle had halted in the middle of the bridge, its protective shielding clearly damaged by the first wave of fire. Through the shattered outer panel, I could see movement inside, alien figures trying desperately to get the vehicle moving again. The doors on the side facing the ravine had been struck hard enough to jam. That meant the only way out was through the exposed side facing the ridge where most of the enemy fire was coming from. "They're going to open the wrong door," I said, more to myself than anyone else. And then they did. The side door slid open, and I saw her for the first time, not through a screen, not through a formal introduction. In person, stepping out into the open under a hail of enemy fire because there had been no other choice. The Queen Regent of the hierarchy was tall, with pale silver skin that seemed to catch even the dim light of the ravine, and deep violet eyes that widened the instant she stepped into the open and understood exactly how exposed she was. Her ceremonial robes, beautiful and utterly useless in a fight, billowed around her as two of her personal guards tried to shield her body with their own. It was not enough. I saw the shot before anyone else did. A single precise bolt of energy fired from a position high on the ridge, aimed directly at the small gap between her guards, timed perfectly for the moment they would both be forced to move. There was no time to shout a warning. No time to calculate the odds, or think about protocol, or remember that according to hierarchy law, my life was worth significantly less than hers. My body moved before my mind finished the thought. I do not remember consciously deciding to run. I remember the stone bridge under my boots, the wind of enemy fire passing close enough to feel, and the distance between myself and the Queen Regent closing faster than it should have been possible to close it. I remember throwing myself forward, arms out, putting my entire body between her and that single, precise shot meant to end her life. The impact hit me like a wall of fire. It struck my side, just below my ribs, and the force of it spun me halfway around before I collapsed onto the stone bridge, the Queen Regent falling beneath me, both of us hitting the ground together. Pain exploded through my body in a way I had never fully experienced before, sharp and burning and impossible to ignore, but somewhere underneath that pain, a small, steady part of my mind noted one simple fact. She was still breathing. Around us, the fighting continued, but something had shifted. I could hear Marcus and Liam pushing forward harder than before, their voices raised, driving back the ambush with the kind of controlled fury that came from watching someone you knew go down. Grace's voice was screaming orders through the comm, calling for immediate extraction, calling for medical support, calling my name over and over in a tone I had never heard her use before. I could not answer her. My vision had started to blur at the edges, the world tilting strangely, sounds becoming distant and muffled, but I felt movement beneath me. The Queen Regent, pushing herself up slightly, her violet eyes locked onto mine with an expression I did not fully understand in that moment. It was not gratitude. Not yet. It was something closer to disbelief, as if she was looking at something that should not have been possible according to everything she had ever known. "Why?" she said, her voice trembling slightly, the first word she had ever spoken directly to me. "Why would you do that?" I tried to answer her, but the words came out broken, barely more than a whisper. "Would have done it, for anyone," I managed, "didn't matter who." Her eyes widened slightly at that, and then everything around me faded into a heavy, spreading darkness. I woke up sometime later in a place that smelled sharp and clean, the kind of clean that only exists in a medical bay. The ceiling above me was smooth white metal, curved gently, with soft blue lighting running along its edges. My side throbbed with a deep, dull ache, but it was manageable now, dulled by whatever medical treatment had already been applied. I turned my head slightly and saw Marcus sitting in a chair beside my bed, arms crossed, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. "You're an idiot," he said, the moment he saw my eyes open. "Good to see you too," I said, my voice rough. "You threw yourself in front of a shot meant for the Queen Regent of the entire hierarchy," he said, shaking his head slowly. "Do you understand how many rules that breaks? Do you understand the kind of attention that brings? Didn't really think about the rules, I admitted. No, Marcus said, a small, tired smile finally breaking through his exhaustion. I don't suppose you did. Liam appeared in the doorway a moment later, holding 2 cups of something warm, handing one to Marcus before sitting down on the edge of my bed. Grace is dealing with command right now, Liam said. There's a lot of noise about what happened, a lot of questions. Is she alive? I asked. The Queen Regent? Alive and completely unharmed, Liam said. Because you made sure of that. I let my head fall back against the pillow, staring up at the smooth ceiling above me, letting that fact settle in slowly. She was alive. Whatever else happened because of what I had done, whatever attention or trouble it brought, she was alive. For a long moment, none of us said anything else. The quiet in the room was strangely comfortable, the kind of silence shared by people who had survived something together and did not need words to understand what that meant. Then the door at the far end of the medical bay slid open, and a hierarchy medical officer stepped inside, moving quickly toward my bed with a data screen in hand. Behind him, I could see 2 members of the honor guard positioning themselves just outside the doorway, standing at rigid attention. Soldier Cole, the medical officer said, his tone unusually formal for someone addressing a human patient. You are to remain here for observation. There has been significant interest in your condition. Significant interest from who? I asked. The medical officer hesitated, glancing briefly toward the doorway before answering. From the Queen Regent herself, he said. She has requested to see you personally, once you are stable enough for a visit. Marcus and Liam exchanged a look I could not quite read. That's not normal, Marcus said quietly, is it? No, the medical officer said simply, before turning and walking back toward the door. It is not normal at all. I lay there after he left, staring up at the ceiling, my side still aching, my mind turning slowly over everything that had happened. I had acted on instinct, the same instinct that had gotten humans labeled reckless, disposable, useful only for the front line. I had not thought about politics, or rules, or what it would mean for a human soldier to save the life of a hierarchy monarch. I had simply seen someone in danger, and moved to stop it. I did not know yet that this single, simple choice was about to change far more than my own life. I did not know that it was about to change everything. 2 days passed before the Queen Regent actually came. I spent most of that time drifting between sleep and boredom, listening to the quiet hum of the medical bay, watching hierarchy nurses move between patients with quick, efficient steps. My side had healed faster than the doctors expected, which did not surprise them much once they remembered what species they were treating. Humans healed fast. It was one of the reasons we were considered useful, and one of the reasons we were considered expendable at the same time. If a wound would close in days instead of weeks, why not put that soldier back in danger sooner? I tried not to think about it too much. On the second evening, the door to my private recovery room slid open without warning, and 2 members of the honor guard stepped inside first, scanning the room with quick, practiced movements. Then they stepped aside, and the Queen Regent walked in behind them. She looked different without the chaos of battle around her. Calmer, more composed, though there was still something sharp and alert in her violet eyes, something that had not been there before the attack on the bridge. She wore simpler robes this time, dark blue instead of ceremonial white, and her silver skin seemed to glow faintly under the soft lighting of the room. "Leave us," she said to her guards, her voice quiet but firm. The 2 guards hesitated, exchanging a brief, uncertain glance. "Your Majesty, protocol requires—" "I am aware of what protocol requires," she said, cutting him off gently but clearly. "I am also aware that the person in this room already proved willing to give his life for mine. I believe I am safe." The guards did not argue further. They stepped out, and the door slid closed behind them, leaving the 2 of us alone in a way that I understood, even without fully knowing hierarchy customs, was deeply unusual. She approached the side of my bed slowly, her eyes studying me with an intensity that made me feel strangely exposed, even though my wound had already healed to little more than a faint mark along my side. "You are recovering well," she said. "Humans heal fast," I said. "It's kind of our specialty." Something flickered across her expression at that. Not quite a smile, but close. "Yes," she said. "I have read the reports on human physiology many times over the years. Rapid healing, high pain tolerance, exceptional endurance under stress." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "I have read those reports as statistics, numbers on a page. I do not think I ever considered what it actually meant, in practice, until I watched you throw yourself in front of a weapon meant to kill me. I did not know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet, waiting." She pulled a chair from the corner of the room and sat down beside my bed, folding her hands in her lap, her posture straight and careful in the way that royalty often carried itself, even in private. "I have asked myself a question for 2 days now," she said, "and I find that I cannot answer it on my own, so I have come to ask you directly." "Ask," I said. "Why did you do it?" I had known this question was coming, somehow, from the moment the medical officer told me she wanted to see me. I had spent parts of the last 2 days trying to figure out how to answer it in a way that made sense, in a way that a member of hierarchy royalty, raised entirely within a system that saw humans as tools, might actually understand. "Because I saw someone about to die," I said slowly, "and I could stop it." That's really the whole answer. She frowned slightly, clearly unsatisfied. "That is not a full explanation. Under hierarchy law, your survival holds no formal value beyond your usefulness in combat. Mine holds significant political and structural value to an entire civilization. By every calculation your training would have taught you, the correct action would have been to allow the shot to strike me, and to focus instead on eliminating the threat, preserving your own capability to continue fighting." "That's not how humans work," I said. "Then explain to me how humans work," she said, leaning forward slightly, her violet eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made it clear this was not simple curiosity. This mattered to her. "Because everything I have been taught about your species describes exactly the kind of calculation I just made. Humans are valued for combat effectiveness, for resilience, for a willingness to accept losses that other species would not accept. I have never once, in any report, in any council session, in any historical record, read the idea that a human soldier might choose to sacrifice himself for someone he does not know, someone who, according to your own society's treatment, considers you disposable." Her words hit something in me, something I had buried a long time ago, beneath training and duty and quiet acceptance of how things simply were. "You're right that the hierarchy doesn't see it that way," I said. "You're right that on paper I should have let that shot hit you and focused on the threat instead. That's what the manual says. That's what 6 years of training tried to drill into me." "Then why," she asked again, quieter this time, "did you not follow the manual?" I took a slow breath before answering, trying to find the right words. Words simple enough to actually explain something that had never needed explaining among my own people. "Because protecting people isn't something we do because we're ordered to," I said. "It's not about rank or value or what someone is worth on paper. When I was young, before I ever joined the military, there was a fire in the building next to ours. I was maybe 10 years old. A neighbor, an old man none of us really knew well, was still inside. My father ran in after him. Not because anyone ordered him to. Not because there was some calculation about how valuable that old man's life was compared to my father's. He ran in because someone needed help, and he was the one standing there who could give it." She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable but focused entirely on me. "That's just who we are," I continued. "It's not written into any law or manual. It's not something the hierarchy trained into us. If anything, the hierarchy has spent generations trying to convince us that our lives matter less than others, and mostly, we've let that belief get pushed onto us, because arguing about it never changed anything. But when the moment actually comes, when someone is standing right in front of you and about to die, None of that matters anymore. You don't calculate, you just move. The room was quiet for a long moment after that. The Queen Regent sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes distant, as if she were turning my words over slowly, examining them from every angle, the way I imagined she examined every important decision that came across her desk. "I have ruled for 11 years, she finally said. "In that time, I have signed countless agreements involving human deployment, human casualties, human losses in conflicts that were never fully explained to the public, because explaining them would have required admitting how disposable we considered your people to be." She paused, her voice growing quieter. "I approved those agreements, because every report I received told me this was simply how humans were suited to serve. Frontline combat, high-risk positions. It was framed as efficient use of a resource, not as a moral question. Most people in the hierarchy see it that way," I said. "I'm not surprised you did too." "I do not think I fully believed it," she said slowly, "until 2 days ago, when someone I had never met, someone my own systems classified as expendable, chose to nearly die protecting a person he had every reason to resent." "I don't resent you personally," I said. "I resent a system. That's different." She looked at me sharply at that, something shifting behind her violet eyes. "You could have let me die," she said quietly, "and ended that system's greatest symbol of authority in a single moment. It would have created chaos, yes, but chaos that might have eventually forced real change. Instead, you chose to save the very structure that has spent generations treating your people as tools." "I didn't think about any of that," I said honestly. "I just saw someone about to die. That's all it ever is, in the moment. There's no time to think about symbols or systems or politics. There's just a choice, help or don't." She was quiet again for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice had changed slightly, softer, more thoughtful. "Do you know what troubles me most about what you just said?" "What?" "That it is the simplest explanation I have heard for anything in 11 years of ruling," she said. "And yet it is the one explanation none of my advisors, none of my scholars, none of my strategists have ever offered me. They speak of leverage, of political outcomes, of calculated risk. None of them have ever spoken of simply choosing to help because someone needed it." "Maybe they've just been trained to think differently," I said. "Or perhaps," she said slowly, "we have simply never allowed ourselves to consider that a species we labeled as tools might actually understand something about honor that the rest of us have forgotten." I did not know how to respond to that, so I stayed quiet, watching her sit there in careful, thoughtful silence, clearly working through something far bigger than the conversation we were having. "There is something else I must ask you," she said after a while. "A more difficult question." "Go ahead. If given the same choice again, knowing everything you know now about how your society treats humans, knowing that no medal or recognition would likely change that treatment in any meaningful way, would you still make the same choice?" I did not hesitate. "Yes," I said, "every time." She studied me for a long moment after that, and something in her expression settled, as if she had finally found the answer she came looking for. "Then I believe," she said quietly, "that the hierarchy has made a terrible mistake in how it has treated your people. And I intend to correct it." I felt a strange mixture of hope and disbelief at those words, the same mixture I imagine every human soldier felt whenever someone in power promised change that rarely arrived. "With respect," I said carefully, "promises like that don't always survive contact with a council room." Something like a small, sharp smile crossed her face at that. "No," she agreed, "they do not, which is why I do not intend to make a promise." She stood slowly, smoothing the front of her dark blue robes, her eyes locking onto mine one final time before she turned toward the door. "I intend to issue an order." She left the room without another word, and I lay there afterward, staring up at the smooth white ceiling, wondering exactly what kind of order a hierarchy monarch could issue that might actually change something as deeply rooted as generations of prejudice. I would not have to wait long to find out. 3 weeks later, I stood in a hallway outside the hierarchy's central council chamber, still adjusting to the strange feeling of wearing a formal uniform instead of combat gear. Grace stood beside me, arms crossed, watching the tall doors ahead of us with an expression somewhere between nervousness and disbelief. "I still don't fully understand why we're here," Grace said quietly. "Soldiers aren't normally invited to council sessions." "I don't think normal applies anymore," I said. Marcus and Liam stood a short distance away, both of them equally out of place in their formal uniforms, both of them glancing occasionally at the massive doors ahead as if expecting them to suddenly reveal something dangerous. Word had spread fast in the weeks since the ambush on the bridge. Word always did. Every soldier on our deck knew that something unusual had happened, that the Queen Regent had personally visited a human soldier in recovery, that she had spoken with him alone for nearly an hour, breaking protocols that had existed for longer than most hierarchy citizens could remember. What none of us knew yet was exactly what she intended to do about it. The massive doors ahead of us finally opened, and a hierarchy attendant stepped out, gesturing for us to enter. The four of us exchanged a brief glance before stepping forward into the council chamber, a wide circular room with tiered seating rising along every wall, filled with representatives from dozens of alien species across the hierarchy. At the center of the room, on a raised platform, the Queen Regent stood waiting, her posture straight, her expression calm and controlled in a way that told me she had prepared carefully for whatever was about to happen. We were guided to a small open space near the center of the chamber, standing slightly below the platform where she stood, surrounded on all sides by the watching eyes of council members, from species I recognized and species I did not. The murmuring in the chamber died down slowly as the Queen Regent raised a hand. "3 weeks ago," she began, her voice carrying easily across the massive room without any need for amplification, "my convoy was ambushed while crossing the Halvan corridor. My honor guard, composed of members from several respected hierarchy species, fell within moments, unable to respond effectively to the threat we faced." A ripple of uncomfortable movement passed through several sections of the chamber. "During that ambush," she continued, "a single human soldier, acting entirely on his own judgment, without orders, without any expectation of reward, placed his own body between myself and a shot that would have ended my life. Every eye in the chamber turned toward me. I kept my posture steady, refusing to let the weight of that attention show on my face, though my pulse had picked up considerably. I have spent the past 3 weeks reviewing the full history of humanity's treatment within this hierarchy," she said. "I have read countless reports describing human soldiers as expendable resources, suited only for frontline deployment due to what our records label as reckless behavior and disposable resilience." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle across the room. "I have come to understand that we were wrong." The murmuring returned, louder this time, several council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. A tall, sharp-featured representative near the front of the chamber rose slightly from his seat, his expression tight, with barely restrained anger. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "With respect, one soldier's actions do not justify rewriting generations of established policy. Humans were classified as they were classified for practical reasons, reasons based on extensive analysis." "Councillor Threck," the Queen Regent said, her voice calm but firm, "I would ask you to consider a simple question before continuing that argument. What word would you use to describe a being who willingly places themselves between danger and someone they have every reason to resent, without being ordered to, without any promise of reward, simply because doing so was the right thing to do?" Councillor Threck hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the direct question. "Loyalty," someone else in the chamber offered quietly. "Honor," another voice added. "Exactly," the Queen Regent said. "Loyalty, honor, values that this hierarchy claims to prize above nearly everything else, values we award medals and titles for among our own citizens, and yet we have spent generations treating the species that embodies those values most naturally as expendable tools. She stepped forward slightly on the platform, her violet eyes scanning across the entire chamber. "I have spoken personally with the soldier responsible for saving my life," she continued. "I asked him directly why he made the choice he made, fully expecting some form of tactical or strategic reasoning. Instead, he explained something far simpler, that protecting others is simply who humans are, regardless of rank, regardless of how they are treated in return." Counselor Threck's expression had shifted from anger to something closer to unease. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "even if what you say is true, reclassifying an entire species standing within the hierarchy carries enormous consequences. Command structures, political representation, resource allocation. This is not a simple decision." "I am aware of the complexity," the Queen Regent said, "which is why I am not asking for a debate today. I am issuing a formal decree." The chamber fell into complete silence. "Effective immediately," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Humanity will be reclassified within the hierarchy, no longer as auxiliary support personnel, but as full citizens with equal standing to any founding species. This includes command rights within joint military operations, formal representation within this council chamber, and official recognition that humanity's willingness toward sacrifice represents not a tactical resource to be exploited, but a cultural strength to be respected and protected." Gasps and sharp murmurs spread rapidly across the chamber. Several council members rose from their seats entirely, some in clear protest, others simply too stunned to remain seated. "Your Majesty," Counselor Threck said, his voice rising slightly now, "this will not be accepted without significant resistance. There are entire factions within this council whose influence relies on maintaining the current structure." "I am aware of that as well," the Queen Regent said, unshaken. "Resistance was expected. It does not change the fact that this decree stands, effective from this moment forward." I glanced sideways at Grace, whose expression had shifted from nervous uncertainty to something closer to stunned disbelief. Marcus and Liam stood equally frozen, clearly processing the sheer scale of what was happening in front of us. The Queen Regent turned toward me directly then, her violet eyes finding mine across the chamber. "Soldier Cole," she said, "step forward." I hesitated for only a moment before moving forward, climbing the few steps onto the platform, standing before her in front of the entire assembled council. "You did not act to change an empire," she said quietly, her voice pitched just for the two of us, though I suspected everyone in the chamber could still hear every word. "You acted because someone needed help. I understand that. But your choice has revealed something about your people that this hierarchy has ignored for far too long, and it is my responsibility, as ruler of this hierarchy, to correct that mistake." She turned back toward the chamber, raising her voice once more. "Let it be recorded across every world within this hierarchy," she said, "that on this day humanity's standing has changed, not because of conquest, not because of political maneuvering, but because one soldier chose to save a life that his own society had told him did not matter more than his." The chamber remained tense, filled with a mixture of stunned silence and quiet, simmering resistance from several sections. I could see clearly, even without deep knowledge of hierarchy politics, that this decision was far from universally welcomed. But I could also see something else, something quieter, in the expressions of several other council members representing smaller, less powerful species within the hierarchy. A flicker of something that looked almost like hope, as if they understood that if humanity's status could change this dramatically, their own standing within this vast, layered system might one day change as well. As the council session slowly dissolved into heated, fractured discussion, Grace stepped up beside me, her expression still somewhat dazed. "You do understand," she said quietly, "that you just became the single most talked about human in the entire hierarchy." "I didn't ask for that," I said. "No," she agreed, "but it happened anyway." Marcus clapped a hand on my shoulder as he and Liam joined us, both of them wearing expressions that mixed pride with clear uncertainty about what came next. "Whatever happens now," Marcus said, "I think it's safe to say things are never going back to how they were before." He was right. Whatever resistance formed in the days and months that followed, whatever political battles erupted across 1,000 worlds because of the decree issued in that chamber, one simple truth remained unchanged. A single choice, made in less than a second on a bridge under enemy fire, had shifted the future of an entire galaxy. I did not fully understand yet exactly how far that shift would reach, but I was about to find out. 10 years is a long time when you measure it in ordinary days. It is a very short time when you measure it in how much an entire galaxy can change. I am older now, my hair beginning to show the first traces of gray, a faint scar still visible along my side if you know exactly where to look for it. I no longer stand on the front line of every dangerous mission the way I once did, though I still remember every detail of that day on the bridge as clearly as if it happened yesterday. The hierarchy is different now. Not perfect, never perfect, but different in ways that once seemed impossible. Human officers now command mixed fleets across dozens of sectors, standing shoulder to shoulder with commanders from species that once viewed us as little more than useful weapons. Human representatives sit within council chambers on more than 100 worlds, their voices carrying the same formal weight as any founding species. It did not happen quickly, and it did not happen without resistance. Councillor Threk and many others who shared his views fought against the decree for years afterward, using every political tool available to slow its implementation, to carve out exceptions, to argue endlessly about details and precedent. Some of that resistance never fully disappeared. Old prejudice rarely does. Even now, there are pockets of the hierarchy where humans are treated with quiet suspicion, where old attitudes linger beneath polite formality. But the direction had changed, undeniably, permanently. What surprised me most, in the years that followed, was not how humanity changed within the hierarchy. It was how deeply the hierarchy itself began to change because of us. Other species, especially smaller, less powerful ones who had spent generations watching from the margins of hierarchy politics, began pointing toward humanity's reclassification as proof that the entire system could shift, that standing within this vast alliance was not permanently fixed by ancient tradition or first contact circumstances. Slowly, carefully, other reclassification movements began forming across the hierarchy, inspired by the precedent set in that council chamber a decade ago. Even more surprising in some ways was watching other species begin adopting values that had once been considered uniquely human. Stories of soldiers from entirely different worlds choosing to protect allies without orders, without calculation, simply because it was the right thing to do, began appearing more frequently across hierarchy news channels. Some called it a cultural shift. Others called it simple exposure, the natural result of centuries spent alongside a species that had never stopped believing loyalty mattered more than logic. I do not know if humanity truly changed the entire hierarchy's values. I suspect it is more accurate to say we reminded them of values that had existed all along, buried beneath generations of political calculation. Marcus retired from active duty 6 years ago, choosing instead to train new recruits, human and alien alike, in tactics that blended hierarchy precision with the kind of instinctive resolve that had once been considered uniquely ours. Liam still serves, now commanding his own mixed unit across the outer sectors, occasionally sending messages filled with stories about young alien soldiers learning, slowly, what it means to fight for someone rather than simply following orders. Grace became the first human to serve on the hierarchy's Central Military Council, a position that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. She still calls occasionally, usually to complain, with fond exhaustion, about how long council meetings can stretch when half the room insists on debating precedent before making any actual decision. As for me, I chose a quieter path in recent years, though quiet is a relative term when you carry the weight of being remembered as the soldier whose single choice reshaped an empire's laws. Today, I stand on a wide balcony overlooking the capital world of the hierarchy, the same world where that council chamber decision was made 10 years ago. The city stretches out below me, a mixture of towering alien architecture and newer structures built with human influence woven throughout the design, a visible symbol of how thoroughly things have blended since that day. Behind me, footsteps approach, light and familiar. "You are thinking too hard again," the Queen Regent says, stepping up beside me at the balcony railing. She looks largely the same as she did a decade ago, though her eyes carry a deeper weight now, the kind that comes from years spent guiding difficult, necessary change across an entire civilization. Over the years, our relationship shifted slowly from soldier and monarch into something closer to genuine friendship, built through countless conversations about leadership, loyalty, and the slow, difficult process of changing minds that had been fixed for generations. "Just remembering," I say. "It doesn't feel like 10 years. "It rarely does," she agrees, resting her hands on the railing beside mine, "though the galaxy looks quite different than it did that day." "Better?" I ask. She considers the question carefully, the way she considers most things. "Better in many ways," she says, "still far from perfect. There are still voices within this hierarchy who resent the changes we made. There are still worlds where old prejudice lingers beneath the surface. But better, yes, more honest about what it claims to value." We stand quietly for a while, watching the city below, human and alien figures moving together through the streets in a way that would have seemed impossible a decade earlier. "Do you regret it?" she asks eventually, her voice softer now. "The choice you made that day, knowing everything it led to, all the resistance, all the political battles, all the attention you never asked for. I think about the question honestly before answering, the way I always try to, when she asks me something that actually matters to her. No, I say, I didn't do it to change a galaxy. I didn't even think about any of that in the moment. I just saw someone about to die, and I could stop it. Everything after that was just what happened because of a very simple choice." She smiles slightly at that, the same small, thoughtful smile I remembered from the medical bay all those years ago. "That remains the most remarkable part of this entire story," she says. "Not the political consequences. Not the reclassification decree, or the council debates, or the shifting balance of power across 100 worlds. The most remarkable part is that it began with someone who was not trying to change anything at all. Not from people trying to reshape the world, just from someone refusing to walk away when it mattered most." She nods slowly, turning her gaze back toward the city stretching out beneath us, filled with a future neither of us could have fully predicted on that bridge 10 years ago. "I never set out to change the galaxy. I only refused to watch someone die when I had the power to stop it. Sometimes that turns out to be enough to change everything."